Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world today. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and you are watching a very special edition of The Breakthrough Show. I'm so honored to be here with you today for a conversation that's incredibly meaningful, not only for those of us in the homeschooling community, but for anyone who believes in the power of family, the power of freedom, and of forging your own path. We're going to be talking about the heart behind homeschooling, what's happening right now in the state of Connecticut here in the United States, the importance of protecting educational choice, and how our guest's own journey as a mother and advocate has shaped the work that she does today. Our guest is a woman whose dedication to education, advocacy, and service has impacted countless families across the state of Connecticut and beyond. She is a mom of 10, a grandmother of 10, a homeschooler, and the founder and co-president of the Connecticut Homeschool Network, also known as CHN. So without further ado, please take a moment, comment down below, let us know where you're joining from, something that's bringing you joy today, and let's welcome Diane onto the show. Hi, Diane. So glad to have you on the show today. I'm thrilled that we get an opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to do this. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. There's nothing that fires me up more than hearing another interview being done and the person being interviewed not being allowed to share the full truth or share the things that are the most important. And so I try very hard here to go, listen, if they're not going to give her a chance to speak, then we're just going to clear the floor and allow this to happen. So I'm really glad that we could do this. But for anybody that's new to you, I would love for you to just take a moment and introduce yourself and maybe tell us a few things about CHN or the Connecticut Homeschool Network.
Sure. Okay, as you already mentioned, I have 10 children. I homeschooled most of them, but not all of them. And that was back in the day around 1990 that we got started. And I never expected to be doing what I'm doing today. I did not see that coming. I was just in a certain place at a certain time, and there was a demand there that needed to be met. And I picked up the ball with it, not realizing where it was going to go. That was back in the day of telephone trees and having a paper newsletter 4 times a year that had field trips listed, and maybe there was still room and maybe there wasn't because word of mouth had already filled it. So, it had its own challenges at the time, but people did make it work statewide, even though there weren't that many of us. And then AOL happened. And we all remember the days of AOL. So that was the divide where the people that wanted to get more involved with the technology did, and some of them didn't. And so I started a group, CHN, and it just exploded. It just went all over the state very quickly. And like I said, I was not prepared for that. I didn't see it coming. And that has led to where we're at now with approximately 25,000 families statewide. And I don't know how many local groups, perhaps a few hundred. There are people that form groups for all sorts of different reasons to have their local needs met. And there are field trips, classes, co-ops, you name it. Proms, dances. Our kids have everything, as you know, and that's where we're at today. And along the way, all of these fun things that we've done for our kids where they've met each other and made friends, and the moms meet each other and make friends, has been a few wrinkles in the fabric, so to speak, where the government has said, oh, maybe they need to be regulated. And I can tell you that it's the same small group of people then moving forward to now. But in the meanwhile, a few terrible things have happened, and this community has been scapegoated because we are not involved in those things. We were not involved in those things, but we've been scapegoated.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to get into so much because this whole conversation is very layered. And the sort of the beautiful thing about homeschooling, which we'll also be touching on as well during this broadcast, is that all of our families operate so differently. We come from very different walks of life. We all have different beliefs. We have different ways of teaching, and Lord knows our children all learn very differently. And so there's so many parts to this conversation, and we hope to do this conversation justice today, give you the information that you need, but also maybe for those of you that don't homeschool or are sitting back going, this is just a homeschooling thing, let me just turn off this broadcast. I encourage you, especially if you're in the state of Connecticut, to stick around, listen to everything we're talking about, because there's so many things here that just scream overreach, period, that every person in this state and beyond should be concerned about when it comes to our government. I want to take a quick moment and say hello to everybody that's joining us over in the comments. Nina is here, Brittany's here, Teresa's here, Ollie's here, and Ollie's joining us from Belgium, by the way, you guys. So this is we have people all over the world watching us right now. We appreciate you being here. Andrea's here in New London, Connecticut. Everybody here, Diana's a superstar, you guys. We all know and love her very much. And so we're going to see all of those fans in the comments today, I'm sure. In this first segment, while we're here, I want to dive into some of the important things around the key legal framework. What does the law actually say about education and home education here in the state of Connecticut, Diane?
Okay, this is really a big one. There is a difference between the laws and the policies, and there has been sort of a battle going on since 1990 when the homeschoolers at that time met with the state and they discussed what became the notice of intent document. And the homeschoolers didn't agree with it then. They don't agree with it now, by and large. There are rare exceptions. And if those people want to do it, then they can go do it. But please don't tell the rest of us that because you want to do it, we should have to. There's a difference to understand between the laws and the policies. And unfortunately, the Department of Ed has chosen to omit what was on the original document called the Notice of Intent. And the heading of that document was Suggested Procedure for Home Instruction. Then it had Notice of Intent and things for the parents to sign off on and deliver to the school. So that has always been a policy that is has never been required by law. The law is very straightforward in Connecticut. It's Connecticut General Statute 10-184. And the title of it is Duties of Parents. All parents shall instruct their child and raise them in a lawful employment. It lists the subjects that are to be instructed. And if the parent does not do that, then they have to enroll them in public school. And if they don't do that and they want to use a private school, that's where 10-220 comes in, because they have to be able to show that there's equivalent instruction. So what does all this mean? The beginning portion of 10-184 is compulsory education. So every parent in Connecticut is actually mandated by law to instruct their own children. And if they don't, they have other options. But that first portion of the statute addresses the initial compulsory education. Everything after that is compulsory attendance. So the only part that we need to concern ourselves with is that. Now, what if you have a child in school, they're in public school, they've been there, whether it's a month or a year or whatever, and for whatever reason you've decided, well, okay, I want to change my mind and I want to homeschool. Well, your child is enrolled in school. So after 4 continuous days of absence that would be unexcused, the truancy law kicks in, as it should, and the district is legally obligated to immediately do certain things, and it has to be done within 10 days after that. So the parents, if they want to withdraw their child to homeschool, have no choice, which is fine, other than giving the school district a letter of withdrawal. That way, they are no longer under the jurisdiction of the school district, and the truancy law applies only to enrolled children. So this is really important, and this is also one of the reasons why the notice of intent is really, it's a moot point. So the parents do give that information to the school, and they know who the student is, how old the student is, where they live, and that they will be homeschooled. So the parents are taking on that duties of parents that's mentioned in the very beginning of 10-184. And it's really important for everyone to understand this, because unfortunately, the superintendents are told they must file the notice of intent. And there are certain school districts, and that can change because superintendents change, but they're in charge of their district. And if they say, all right, we're gonna report to DCF because we don't have an NOI, they are weaponizing DCF. That's false reporting, because
Right.
there's no statute saying that we have to do that. There is a statute, 10-184, saying that we have to instruct our children, and we are innocent until proven guilty. So if there is an instance where there is suspicion of abuse or neglect, then the homeschool community has many mandated reporters to take care of that. Anybody can pick up the phone, a family member, a friend. Is it a flawless system? No. And that's actually part of the problem, because within the system, even with the public schools, there are mandated reporters that don't report. There are mandated reporters that do report concerning issues, and their calls are not accepted. So, all to say that the system is very flawed, and mandating something upon the homeschool community when we already have checks and balances in place is going to guarantee nothing but a false sense of security and unwarranted restrictions upon really good families that don't need them anyway.
Right. Right.
So, that's really a problem. Um, and if people, like I said, if there are people in the homeschool community that want to have contact with the school district and want to file a notice of intent, go ahead and do it. But
Right.
who are you to tell us that we don't want to?
Right.
That's no
Right.
different than if I'm a vegetarian and you tell me, no, you can't be a vegetarian because I'm a meat eater. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's
Right.
ridiculous. We either
Right.
have freedom or we don't. And that also means from personal choice.
Right, right. I
So,
think what has been the most, sort of concerning thing to me, when I grew up here in the state of Connecticut in Groton, and went to public school, then went to private school, then went back and graduated from public school, and I think we're taught, most of us, from a young age that, when you have a child, when the child reaches school age, you put them in school, end of story. So what I find the most interesting is the beginning of that statute 10-184, where the very beginning says it's the parent's duty to educate the child, and then if you don't want to do that, there are other options. like public school, private school, any of these other entities. So that's what I found most interesting about this, is thinking back to me growing up, and I didn't know anyone who was homeschooled growing up. So my thought was, that's what you do. When you have a child and they reach the age old enough, you put them in school, period. That's it. And so I find that the most sort of interesting to me, but also I found it interesting that when other things came up over the last week, that first part of that statute was conveniently left out, skipped over, and like you said, even many of the people that are in power, so to speak, don't even acknowledge that part of the statute. So before I want to make sure that you've said everything you've wanted to say about current homeschool law. And after the break, we're going to come back and talk about what's actually happening right now. But is there anything else that you would like to say about this particular topic, Diane?
I think we've covered it. Yeah.
All right. All right. So listen, guys, we're going to be really super quick, very quick break. When we come back, as I said, we're going to be talking about what we're currently facing here in Connecticut when it comes to homeschooling, and also national trends and some other things. So we'll be right back after this. Don't go anywhere.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home, where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life, and go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show. We're so glad that you're here today. My name is Jessica Dugas. I'm your host today, and I'm here with Diane Connors, the founder of the Connecticut Homeschool Network. And we have been talking about what is happening behind the scenes with all of the homeschool stuff here in the state, why it should be concerning to every parent in the state of Connecticut, every human in the state of Connecticut, whether you homeschool or not, and maybe even what some of the national trends that are going on and happening right now before our eyes. What would you say, Diane, are the top issues that we're facing right now here in the state of Connecticut?
Well, as far as education goes, in public education, they're facing a problem that they say they're working on it, and that is the chronic absenteeism and truancy issue, which is about 90,000 students that are enrolled in public school that are not going to public school. And who knows where they are? Who knows if they're being properly fed? Who knows how safe they are or are not? And the response is, we're working on it. And that does not gel with the numbers versus an incident in Waterbury that did not involve a homeschooled child, and wanting regulation over this community. It's why people are saying, we're being scapegoated again, because in 2012 was the Sandy Hook tragedy. At that time, Adam Lanza was not homeschooled. He was never homeschooled. He had what some people do not understand, and the legal term is homebound education. And that is an agreement with an enrolled public school student who is doing part of their instruction at home with the approval of the public school. So he was never homeschooled. And then when you fast forward to 2018, I believe, with Matthew Tirado, he was never homeschooled either. He was enrolled in public school since kindergarten. He was also enrolled in a private school, and he was truant for up to 2 years at a time. And DCF was involved repeatedly, but nothing changed. He was never homeschooled. He was never withdrawn to homeschool. And now we fast forward to the Waterbury incident where a public school teacher, his stepmom, who taught in the Waterbury School District, is the one that refused to allow him to go to school. There was no letter of withdrawal that anyone has produced. He actually, stepmom actually told the principal at that time, Tom Perrone, in an interview that's available for anybody to watch, that she was going to transfer his records over to the Wolcott School District. And to his credit, Perrone followed up. He checked with the schools in that district, and he was never enrolled there. So, it sounds like it's a DCF failure. They dropped the ball. It's not a homeschool issue. It's a tragic issue. Fortunately, he didn't die.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really big problem with these systems. And to think that systems that have the problems that they do can take on financially or time-wise the additional burden of checking in on homeschoolers is not realistic. And it's probably unsafe all by itself because they don't have the ability to do it.
Right.
They're struggling already as it is, which, anybody that's on the internet knows that, because there are teachers and others that are in the system that speak out. We get phone calls from people that work in the system in all capacities, and they want to leave. They start they tutor, they leave the system, they start tutoring services, they start private schools, some type of alternative where they can still work and have an income, but do it in a manner where they don't have the restrictions.
Right. What do you know, really quick, Diane, for those people that hadn't heard of those cases that you mentioned? There's been sort of a lot of back and forth, I think, between the homeschool community, our attorneys in the homeschool community, and then the people that are trying to push this as to what's the truth surrounding these situations. And I know that you have stated many times that these children were not homeschooled. Or just to clarify for people, do we know that to be fact, or is that what people are saying because they didn't file a notice of intent or something like that?
No, that is a fact. The OCA report for Tirado clearly states that he was not homeschooled. And to her credit, I've said this a few times, she called it subterfuge, which is simply, you could have a teenager that says to the parents, I'm going to go do A, B, and C on Friday night, when in fact they're not. They're doing D, E, and F. It's a lie. There's no other way to say it. It's a lie. So that's what happened in this Waterbury case. She said she was going to be moving him over to the other school district, and there was no transfer of records and there was no withdrawal. So, it just hasn't been produced. And with Adam Lanza, it's clearly delineated that he was a homebound instruction student. None of them were homeschooled. None of them were.
Yeah. So when this tragedy, that's the only way to describe it, happened in Waterbury, which was the most recent case you're referring to, at what point did you know that we needed to go ahead and act as a homeschool community?
I had no idea because, it wasn't a homeschool issue.
Right.
What happened is I was approached by legislators saying that there was a plan in the works for an information session, and perhaps they were calling it an emergency. And I was quite taken aback by that, as were others. So that progressed to deciding who was going to be able to speak. And it ended up, as it ended up, where one of the larger homeschool groups that's statewide and has been around for decades was removed. They were not allowed to speak. There were a group of moms in Fairfield County that have a homeschool coalition, and one of them was supposed to speak, and they were not allowed because they weren't statewide. The problem with that is 3 of the 4 legislators are from Fairfield County. So those moms were not happy. They felt that their voice was squelched. I would say a little bit differently, while I do understand them and I agree with that, everybody's voice was squelched and the burden was put on me, which I didn't appreciate, having to speak for everybody. I don't need that. Nobody wants that. I was in the hot seat. That's how that came about. And we even said in email communications with the legislators, where's the raised bill with a public hearing so everybody gets their 3 minutes of testimony, whether they're for it or against it. Because CHN has said many times, if you're for something, speak up. If you're against something, speak up. As an organization, we have a position. We do not compromise. And why? Why? Are we afraid of our government? No, we're not. We've worked with them more than people know. If you look at the trends, if you look at the patterns of what's going on nationwide, it's very concerning because this isn't just isolated in Connecticut. What's happening is these grabs for power and control over the homeschool community are happening in different states. And there's an organization that is also, to whatever degree, behind that. And that's concerning because it goes back to that, just as an example, if somebody's a vegetarian and somebody else is not, who gets to tell whom what you must do and how? It just doesn't make any sense. And for that matter, when you get into the issue of, so you had a homeschooled child and they grow up and they say, oh, I wish I had gone to public school. Well, the grass might look greener on the other side, but you'll never really know that. And conversely, how many kids are in public school that wish that they could be homeschooled and they really want to be homeschooled, but for whatever reason, the parents are saying no. And that's not to criticize the parents at all. It's simply to say that no matter what the decisions are, you could always say, but what if? And where do you draw the line with that? Doesn't it come back to, we each have to make our own personal decisions and be responsible for those decisions instead of pointing the finger anywhere else or thinking that flawed systems can do better for us than we can do for ourselves or for our children.
Right. I want to quickly say hello to Christina that's joining us. Thank you for the compliment of the article. And of course, I said all the Diane's fans are going to come out of the woodwork today as well. Ollie is talking from a global perspective. As I said, he's joining us from Brussels, Belgium, and said that this is a global issue as well, not even within just the United States. And the world is elevating by the depth of tolerance for others to exist and decide of their lives while they are not harming others. And that's it. Pointing fingers is more easy to look at our own darkness and the own things that are going on within and the different organizations within the states and other places around the world. One of the things that I want to be sure to mention today is how often I've heard, well, if you're doing everything right, Jessica, and even in conversations with people that I know very well, you're one of the good ones, Jessica, but what about? And if you're doing everything right, what are you afraid of? Why can't you just go register or do the things that they want you to do because you're doing them anyway? What is your response on that? And I know, like as you said, CHN has a stance on that as well.
Yeah. So if you want to do those things, do them. If you want to file a notice of intent, file it. We've always said that. It is your choice as a parent. And that's what this is all about, is having the choice. Because if you have it taken away from you, then why? You only start to put limitations on people, and it's incrementalism. If you look at the patterns and what has happened, not only in other countries, but in other states here, it's almost never just one thing. It's incrementalism. Maybe the following year, it's a little bit more. Maybe 5 years later, it's a little bit more. Where does it end? So if you want to file a notice of intent and you want to do a portfolio review, go do it. Nobody's stopping you. But don't tell somebody else what they have to do. And, if you have nothing to hide, well, what if you do have something to hide? So let's talk about that. If you do, it still goes back to what I said earlier. We have a system in place. Nothing's perfect, but the homeschool community is filled with mandated reporters. And you don't have to be a mandated reporter to make a phone call. I think it's something like 47% of all calls to DCF are from mandated reporters. So that means 53% are not. So, we're adults. We can pick up the phone. And we have to trust that system to the best of our ability, even though nobody denies that it's flawed. And the other part that I want to mention that's a bit of a segue is, even within our legislature, this is an epidemic nationwide where state legislatures are facing significant internal challenges related to breaking of oaths to serve the public and the bullying of legislators by leadership. These issues are undermining our democratic principles, and they're eroding public trust. And they're creating a toxic work environment for the legislators that went in really wanting to represent the voice of the people. And some of the problems that are going along with that, like I said, it is in Connecticut. We've heard legislators tell us that they were being pressured internally. It could be that they're up for, I'll call it a promotion, and I know that's not the correct term, or a demotion, which is also not the correct term, if they don't play ball with leadership. And that's not okay.
Right.
So who's calling for regulation of homeschooling right now?
Right.
We can all do the math on that. So there are very serious problems that go beyond just whether or not, well, should they be or shouldn't they be regulated? Should they or should they not have to file a notice of intent? We've already seen misuse of authority with that. Back in the Toronto case, where the Office of Child Advocate took notices of intent, which is personal, private information that families filled out on those forms. These families did nothing wrong. They had no allegations against them. They simply did follow the policy procedure and did their notice of intent, and they were cross-checked against DCF. And then the statistics that came out, which were very misleading, citing 36% of the families having DCF in their life. No. What does that actually mean? And this is so important. First of all, I think it's my opinion, but I think it's fair to say that most of us are not mathematicians. We make be able to do math, but we may not have a degree in math, okay,
Right.
and that's fine. However, when the John Q. public looks at that statistic and they say to themselves, well, I didn't know that. That's terrible. 36% of the homeschoolers have DCF in their life. No, 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 no. That includes anybody that made a call. That includes the schools reporting to DCF for a family that didn't file a notice of intent. And like I said, that's false reporting. It could be so many things that are unsubstantiated. And I believe out of all of the cases that she cherry picked, which is not good statistics,
Mm-hmm.
cherry picked the large cities, certain people, and came up with that statistic. And when you look at the breakdown of that, the real question is not that 36% of them ever had a call to DCF. How many of them were substantiated?
Right.
I believe it was 1%. So the abuse and neglect statistics in the public schools, and this is not an easy conversation, but it's an important one. 10 to 20% of the adults employed in public schools nationwide, Connecticut's not exempt, 10 to 20% of those adults are sexually or physically abusing the students. That's a problem. That does not even touch upon the 40, I don't know why the statistic is so wide in range, but 40 to 70% of student to student problems. Okay, so let's look at the homeschool community. Are they above reproach? Of course they're not. Of course there are problems. And there's somebody out there that is abusing or educationally neglecting a child. But we have a reporting system. And the statistic that is known for that is 2%. 2%. So that would indicate the system is working. And you don't have to have a mandated reporter for a call to happen because anybody can do it. So you're talking about 10 to 20% with the adults versus 2% when the children are with their parents that have their best interest at heart. They could just send them to school.
Right.
So this is a problem. And when the legislators cannot be fully trusted to be representing their constituents because these other manipulations and internal politics are happening, and bullying of legislators by leadership and threats by them, which is still part of bullying. There are cases that are documented nationwide of this going on. It needs to stop.
Right.
It needs to stop. So
there are so many layers of this, and I understand for those of you watching that maybe this is your first time hearing about all of this, that some of this is really difficult to hear, and I want to just make a sort of blanket statement that any of the parents out there that are watching, that you do send your children to public school, there is no any judgment being sent out to you for doing what you need to do for your family. And just as we're standing up for homeschool freedoms, we're standing up for your freedom to choose to send your kids to school. But you should not have to send your children to school under those circumstances, under those kinds of numbers for abuse happening, whether it's student to teacher to student or student to student. Your child should not have to endure that no matter the circumstance. And so that's why this conversation is so important, because if we don't come together on this matter, it's going to be one right, privilege, whatever, taken away after the next, because it's just going to snowball. And so it's so important, I think, for everybody to come together in this conversation. Before we close out this segment, Diane, what are the top things, I guess, that you're hearing right now, and what do we need to be most concerned about or listening for?
We need to keep our voices heard in Hartford. That's very important. And one of the biggest concern, well, I'm going to say the two biggest concerns that we're hearing is everything I just talked about. Having power and authority given to systems that are clearly broken over another community that has very little issues at all. It's just irresponsible, and it is probably also dangerous, if not cruel. Why? Because many of the homeschoolers that are homeschooling today have removed their children from school because of unsafe conditions. We have families that have told stories about their children being physically harmed by staff, by students, unresolved bullying that goes on. There was a child, this is daily, we're hearing these reports daily from people in the system that are saying, please don't tell anybody that I talked to you, and we don't. It's really not safe. And I also want to say, I have a stake in this on a personal level, as many of us do, because while I did homeschool most of my kids, some of my kids also went to private school and public school. And I currently have grandkids that are in public school and some that will be homeschooling. So it's important that we keep our voices heard up there, and that we look at how this will impact everybody. You know, if you're of the mindset that, well, filing a notice of intent, if that's mandated, that's not really a problem, and do a portfolio review at the end of the year. Fine, you don't have to mandate that, because if you want to do it, you go ahead and do it. But who are you to say that all of us have to do it when you're talking about basically forcing and mandating a family to go back to the very source of their trauma, their abuse, and their pain, which is some of these districts where these children have been hurt. And it's not a rare child where this has happened. Many families are withdrawing because of this. Their children are not safe.
I think I was thinking about this analogy the other day about, different things that we have to register for here in the United States. We have a birth certificate, a social security number, we register our cars. There's so many different things that we have to register for. And there are laws for all of those things and already in place. We know, like, for example, with children under a certain age, they're supposed to be in a car seat. But not every car is being pulled over to check to make sure. I mean, could you imagine every single car being pulled over and for no reason and just going, I just want to make sure that your child's buckled in correctly. And when an accident happens, we don't go, well, now you're just not allowed to drive anymore, or now you have to do this extra thing or this extra thing. We trust the laws and things that we have that are already in place to catch those things. Do things fall through the cracks? Absolutely. It happens whether we're talking about homeschooling, public schooling, private schooling, any of these things. But we have to, at some point, I think, trust what we already have in place, because as you're talking about, the more regulation that gets put in there, it just becomes a snowball. It becomes a slippery slope to other things. And frankly, as you said, we are in a country, we're supposed to be, innocent until proven guilty. And the fact that that's swapping to guilty until proven innocent is unacceptable and should be unacceptable for most people that are watching here. I want to take some comments when we come back. Let us know, especially if you're in the state of Connecticut here and watching, what your thoughts are. And after the break, we're going to talk about maybe some of the things that people don't know about homeschoolers and try to end on a little bit of joy and then a call to action as well. So we'll be right back after this. Don't go anywhere.
Caldwell Williams. On April 4th, I was 90 years old, grandson of slaves. My parents were first generation free. A long time ago, I embraced the definition of love. Love is the experience of well-being. And a friend is one who mutually shares that experience of well-being with you, which opens up almost infinite creative possibilities.
We're told as children to go make friends, but what did that look like? And how has it changed over time? Friendship is one of life's greatest gifts, and sometimes one of its greatest challenges.
Someone who is there to support you, someone who is willing to go through the ups and downs of life with you.
Connection, but also the opportunity for learning and deeper connection.
If I don't talk to that person for 2 months, we pick up the phone like we've never stopped talking. To me, that is what a friend is.
Friend to me is someone I can share my joys, also the struggles I have.
Friend means somebody that you can talk to and that you can trust.
So a friend to me is actually someone really, really close, an inner circle person.
And I think it's an important discussion to pass on to other generations so they don't get caught being lonely at the end because they haven't thought about friends in different ways.
This is the Friendship Paradox, a raw and real exploration of connection. Through 26 voices across miles and time zones, we reflect on the friendships that shape us, challenge us, and teach us who we truly are.
I need your shoulder.
What does it mean to be a friend? How do we navigate connection in a world that's constantly changing? And what can we learn about friendship by looking within? This isn't just a film about friendship, it's a call to reflect on the relationships we built, the ones we've lost, and the sacred connection we have with ourselves. What does friendship mean to you?
Welcome back to the Breakthrough Show. Please visit thefriendshipparadox.com and check out the film. That conversation that we had with all of those people ties in so beautifully to the conversation that we've been having here today about the importance of connection, community coming together. And many of us in that film shared about our own experiences of lack of connection within the schools that we were going to and how that changed over time. And so go check that out, thefriendshipparadox.com. I'm Jessica Dugas. You're watching The Breakthrough Show, and we're here with Diane Connors, the founder of Connecticut Homeschool Network. We've been talking about the laws here in the state, what's currently happening with some talk of overreach within the homeschool community here in Connecticut. And we kind of wanted to end on some joy and share some information that maybe some people don't realize is the reality of homeschooling and what that looks like. I want to start with, maybe Diane, what are some of the things that you hear from parents about the breakthroughs they've experienced in beginning to homeschool their children? What has it been like for them?
Oh, yeah, this is the best. It's so wonderful to have parents come to us. And in the beginning, they're very nervous because they don't fully understand what all their options are. So we talk to them on the phone, we email with them. We have homeschooling 101 meetings on Zoom. We have a PowerPoint on our website to explain the basics, answering all of the common questions that you get in the beginning. And 9 times out of 10 these days, they're coming to us because they're removing their children from a problem. Sometimes we do still talk to families that their children are not even school age, and they're like, we know that we're going to homeschool. That's going to be our lifestyle. And we explain everything to them about all of the curriculum options, curricula, and there are hundreds of them, and we help them to narrow it down. And maybe they want to take a different learning style approach. They are told and explained what all their options are, so they can narrow that down and feel like, okay, I've got a handle on this. And then it's the social aspect, which there are so many homeschoolers. Between that and the speed of the internet and the number of area groups, it's so easy to connect. And if you don't see what you want, you can start your own area group and find other families that you can connect with. And um, they do everything, as I said earlier. So these families get going, they often will take time, we call it deschooling. It's a period of time to kind of decompress, especially when you're going from Monday through Friday, getting up early, get on that school bus, the whole routine, coming home, having dinner, doing your homework, going to bed, and starting it all over again. And that there's some stress in that, and shifting gears both psychologically and emotionally to the homeschooling lifestyle and how that is so often approached, even though it's not exactly the same for any two people. It's a shift. It's a real shift. So they might take a few weeks or a month and make that shift and figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And we hear this from parents all the time. It's posted in Facebook all the time. I wish I had done this earlier. During COVID, the parents that they withdrew their children for a whole number of reasons. They didn't really understand homeschooling. And many of them a year later said, yeah, we're not sending our kids back. We love this. We didn't have any idea what this was really like. And that's really awesome, because if it works for their family, then great. We hear that so much. And children that have special needs, I was speaking to, I won't name her, there's no need for that, but I had a conversation with a special ed director who told me that there were at least 50% of the special needs population that they were doing better during the forced homeschooling, during the distance learning.
Yeah.
And the parents realized, wow, having the structure of the home setting for the child to be able to take the breaks that they need, work in small chunks instead of staying, trying to keep pace with what was going on in the classroom, which for them was so stressful. It was just working better. So a lot of those parents didn't send their kids back either. But I appreciated her honesty in saying that to me, that they were seeing the improvements with the goals and objectives from the IEPs, that these kids were just improving by being in a home setting. That's super important. But just so many positives. Usually, if somebody starts homeschooling, they don't go back, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. And there's an area that the state could improve in. If we have, because it can happen for a number of reasons. We have people that move into Connecticut, whether it's from out of state or out of country. They go to the local public school, they enroll, and they're automatically accepted. Whatever work they've done, let's say they're moving into Connecticut and their child has done ninth grade in another state or another country. They are not told, oh, well, we can't accept those credits.
Right.
You have to go back to ninth grade and start over. That's how they treat the homeschool community. Right. And they really need to improve on that. If they are interested in our kids being there, then, act like it. Because when a family, for whatever reason, says, oh, I'm going to enroll my child for 10th grade, for whatever reason, they're going to public school, and then they just come at the parents right out the gate with, well, we don't accept credits for their homeschool work.
Right.
And the irony is, oftentimes these kids are ahead, and oftentimes they're ready to start college classes concurrently when they're homeschooling, and they do, and I know, the GED, that might have stigma in some people's minds, but nevertheless, we were told that pretty much when a homeschooler takes the GED, they come in first place in Connecticut. So, it's not because we're doing it wrong. It's because we're doing it differently, and they don't have control, and they might not understand it. And there's different ways of looking at that. How much communication do you have with somebody who can make control over you, even when they don't understand, because that's not a guarantee they're going to.
Right.
So, but it's great. It's great. It's a vibrant community.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It really is beautiful. We began our homeschooling journey when we lived in Alabama. As I said, I grew up here, but then we lived down there for quite some time. And we experienced, I mean, the reason I decided was largely because we experienced some of those things in the public school system that we'll just leave at are not a fun time. And my kids were struggling. One of my sons was not getting the help that he needed. The teacher would be on the phone, her cell phone, the whole class. Like, there was just so many things that were happening. And I would go up there as a concerned parent and say, the principal, the superintendent, all of these things, and it was just being brushed off. And so I thought to myself, I have got to have more control over this. And then, as you know, being a large family mother, the logistics down there, the schools are split up differently. So by the time I pulled out my children, I had 4 kids in 4 different schools. And the logistics of nobody communicates and nobody does any of that. So the logistical side of things became much easier for us as a large family in the home environment. And it's not to say that we haven't had our challenging moments. As I mentioned, I grew up in public school. I did have homebound education, and I'm so glad that you clarified what that means earlier, because I had a surgery in high school and had a tutor from the school come to my home and teach me there. But that was my first little taste of maybe what it could be like to learn sort of at my own pace at home. And but ultimately, this has been such a beautiful experience for us to try to find our way of what does this look like for our family, and how can I support each of my children who learn very differently in the way that they learn the best, and allowing them to explore topics that mean the most to them, and watching them become passionate about those things that they might not have had that opportunity in public school. And so it's been a beautiful experience for our family. Like I said, not without challenges, but nobody's without challenges in their own spaces. And so I want to give you the last couple of minutes, Diane, to just take the floor. Let us know what are recap, what are those things that we need to be most aware of right now, how people can get involved. And while you're doing that, I'm going to be sharing some links in the comments for you guys to plug in if you're not plugged in already. And I'll let you have the floor, Diane.
All right, thank you. I would say stay connected, keep the communication open, find out what other people have to say, because we were not allowed to all have a voice up at the legislature. So you can connect with your legislators and explain to them, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing, here are the type of things that our children are doing. We were doing fine. Please leave it alone. We have so many systems in place, and regulating everybody is not going to work. It's going to cause terrible problems for the people that needed to get out of that system because their children were not safe. And having to report back to them because it's mandated is really not the answer. It's not the answer. So.
Thank you for that, Diane. I put some links down below, you guys. I put the link to if you're already a homeschooler, there is a link to the Homeschool Network in the state of Connecticut, a link to the Facebook page down in the comments. There's also a link to chomeschoolnetwork.org in the comments as well. There's a mailing list, correct, that people can sign up for to keep informed. And there's also, Diane was telling me, which I didn't even know, because I wish I had time to dig through all the websites, but there's a quiz too I think somewhere on the website, right? Where for people that are new to homeschooling, where you could take this quiz and find out what style might be for you as a homeschooler. So that's fun as well. There's also, if you're in Connecticut, you're not homeschooling and you're considering it, there is a group specifically by CHN for that as well. So you can check that out. If for those of you that are interested in the activism side of things and coming with us up to Hartford, there is a sign up for that. You can send me an email, which I also put down below, jessica@thebreakthroughshow.com, and I'm happy to plug you in wherever I can. And I so appreciate this conversation today, Diane, and you sharing your heart for this work, and speaking. I know that you didn't want this to have to speak on behalf of everybody, but I will be so bold as to say, on behalf of everyone, we thank you for accepting that calling when it was not necessarily what you signed up for. And we appreciate you more than we can even express. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I understand. I understand. So it was, it became a moral obligation that it had to be done.
Yeah.
And I did the best I could. And that's the best any of us can do. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate all of you all so much for being here today. Please take a moment, if you haven't done so yet, on whatever platform you're on. We are in so many places right now, you guys. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook in several places. We're on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube. We're on TikTok. That's how come I keep looking up here, all of my friends over on TikTok. You can take this broadcast and please share it out. It'll be up indefinitely. More people need to hear this information. And I cannot tell you enough that this is not just about homeschoolers. Every single person, especially in the state of Connecticut right now, should be concerned about the things going on behind the scenes within our government. They are supposed to be working for us, my friends. And I just cannot hammer that home enough. What a powerful and important conversation today that we have had. Diane, thank you again, not only for being with us today, but for the tireless work that you and the whole team at CHN does for us and continues to do across our state. Whether you're a homeschooling family considering it or someone who values educational freedom and parental choice, I truly hope that today's show gave you some insight, encouragement, and a reminder that we are not alone and we are stronger together. I keep saying to my kids, this is a fabulous time to break bread with people that we might not agree with on other issues. We need to come together. It is so, so important. If you'd like to get involved, as I mentioned, learn more or stay up to date on the work being done by CHN, make sure to connect with Diane through the links in the show notes. Thank you all so much for being here, for watching today, and being a part of this ongoing conversation. I want to give a personal thank you to my friends, my family, and of course, my children for being so supportive as mommies just, we're fired up now. It's happening. Thank you all so very much for being here. I'm Jessica Dugas, and we'll see you next time on an all new episode of The Breakthrough Show. Have a good day, everybody.